I can't hear you, Hillary.
Tony was finishing up her phone call with me.
Oh, okay. I was like,
I was making sure that wasn't recorded online. Well, welcome finally. Oh my goodness. So sorry. It wouldn't be a live without some technical issues here and there.
yeah, no worries. Good to see you.
This is Colleen for everyone watching, Colleen Caskey. Why don't we get started with tell us a little bit about who you are, where you were located, who you work with, and then we can check in, listen, and go from there.
Yeah, sounds great. Colleen Caskey. I am currently zooming in from Charleston, South Carolina, where my husband and I live. We lived here for about a year now. I work with Intervarsity Christian Fellowship. I'm starting a new role as the director of our athletes ministry, Athletes Intervarsity. And yeah, I've worked for Intervarsity for about 15 years, and I got involved with Luke 10, I think in the beginning of the school year in 2018. So I think September 2018 is when I got involved with Luke 10.
Wow. 2018.
Yeah, I think I was in your Church 101, right? We're Church 101 together.
Yes, yeah. I was technically supposed to be training John, or John was supposed to be training me. I don't know. It was interesting, but one of those.
Yes, it was great. It was great to be Church 101, such a bonding experience. So I have fond memories of those meetings together.
Yeah, they were definitely fun. Great. Well, should we start off with a check-in then?
Yeah, that sounds great.
I'm checking in. I was a little flustered. Can't wait to listen and calm down. Tons of energy, lots of things happening in the background of the live, which is to be expected as well. And that is taking up a lot of space for me. And then also Zach, he is supporting us, not live, but live from his own house.
Zach, if you're watching.
Definitely carrying him as well in this tender, chaotic energy that's happening. And didn't realize until this morning that I signed up for 2 interviews on the first day. And I was like, oh, it's fine. And it really has been a joy. So
who else did you interview?
Bethany Boring.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, we hung out a little earlier today and it was so fun. Yeah, so I think a little chaotic, a little excited, and then really glad to be here with you and hear a little bit more about what's going on in your story. And yeah, I like hanging out with you. We've been on some form of video since 2018 together. So that's kind of cool.
Yes, I love it. I know it's crazy to think that's a long time ago. Was that 7 years ago? Wait,
2018, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 5?
5 years ago. Okay, I can't do math, but yes, that's a long time.
It is.
I think you were zooming in from the Frisbee field when we would do Church 101 before. So like I have gotten pieces of your life.
Nice. I barely remember that, but that makes a lot of sense. It's exciting. I'm in, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, so I am checking in as I'm feeling, I think, kind of a nervous, excited, thinking about this interview and just honored to be asked, but also wanting to kind of steward this well and share well. And so it feels, I was a college athlete, and it feels like a good pregame mindset was to be excited for the game, but also a little nervous so that, you could show up with the energy that you needed. So I think I'm feeling a little bit of that heading into chatting with you now. And yeah, I mentioned that I'm starting this new role as the director of Athletes Intervarsity. And I just sent out an official letter today to my prayer support team, letting them know about this role. So I've been kind of waiting for the right time to send that out, and just have received so much love in the last hour and a half from people reaching out and congratulating me, and people I forgot were on that prayer letter list are reaching out. I'm like, oh yeah, it's good to connect. So feeling excited about what the Lord has ahead, and yeah, grateful for all the support I have and so many people. Yeah, just reaching out to want to congratulate me in this next role.
Yay. Oh, that's so cool. I'm glad the email was sent, and then such an amazing thing to get immediate response from emails.
Yes. Well, when you send these emails to these ministry lists or, distribution lists, and sometimes you get no responses. You're like, maybe no one gets these, but I get emails and I don't always respond. So this one had some big news, and it was nice to have a number of people reaching out and saying they got it and heard the news. So good reminder, keep sending those ministry update emails because people do read them.
Yes. And every now and then they'll respond.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, why don't we just quiet a bit and listen on if there's anything we need to talk about. We did chat about some questions. We'll definitely be thinking on those, but if there's anything else that either we need to talk about or that Jesus wants us to know in this moment. I'm going to leave my video on. I am going to mute. And do you want to do maybe 2 minutes?
Sure. Sounds good.
Right. Sounds good. And if you're joining in from home, welcome to the Relational Revolution Live. And embrace the silence with us as we just listen to ourselves and listen to Jesus on what he has for us today. All right. Awesome. Great. Did you add any more questions to our list or anything specific come up for you?
No more questions came up. Yeah, I just felt like the Lord was saying, you don't need to fear, you're not in control, rest, come rest in my joy. Dr. Kent Smith, his words there. And then just an encouragement to share stories, that there are really good things happening in Intervarsity and in my life. And they're, they're worth sharing. But then at the end, I heard ask Hillary a question, and I didn't have enough time to find out what question I'm supposed to ask you. So I'll put it out there. If there's a question
Oh,
you want me to ask you, or maybe I'll pay attention if one kind of pops into my mind as we go, but that random thought, that spontaneous thought popped in. So
yeah. Wow, fun. Thank you. Well, I would love to hear one of the stories. And I think one of the stories that I'm interested in first, maybe you can change this. This came up for me, but you weren't always the director of student athletes for all of Intervarsity. What was it like for your first position, and when you first realized that, hey, I think we need to start checking in and listening? Like, what was there one moment? Was it a gradual phase? Like, what was that like for you?
yeah, so I think that happened. Well, I've been on staff with Intervarsity for 15 years, and 2018 was about 10 years when I got involved with Luke 10, started Church 101 with you and John White. That was about 10 years in. And so pursued Luke 10 and kind of wanting to try church in a different way, not because of any tension or hesitation I was having in my work with Intervarsity. It was more in my marriage and my husband and I just wanting more from our church experience. And so as I was going through Church 101 and started to see how it was impacting our relationship, and we started inviting some of our friends into it, it just had a very real sense of this wouldn't just be good for us. This would also be good for the people that I lead. And so, wasn't quite sure, like, okay, do I bring all of Church 101? Like, how do I do this? How do we start to introduce some of these things that have been really transformative for me? And so I didn't necessarily bring just like checking in. I think John helped me to think about a small group of athletes that I was working with at the University of Delaware and inviting them to go through Church 101. So I guess maybe I was getting trained at that time too. I kind of went into facilitator training, was recording those times, debriefing with Tony, and wanted to take these athletes through Church 101. And watching these 5 athletes just kind of catch on so quickly, they were the ones that started bringing checking in to their weekly athlete meetings, their team Bible studies that they were leading. Like, it just kind of caught virally. I didn't even tell them to do that. And it was just natural that they were like, my teammates need this. Other athletes on campus need this. And so we're going to bring checking in and then listening prayer as well to the ministries that they were part of on campus. But I think that was the first time. And then, it did start to kind of spread out from there, and I could tell more stories, but that was really fun to watch this small group of athletes just get it in the way that I was getting it and wanting to share it with people around them.
That's amazing. I asked a similar question to Bethany on like how she started with children in her church. And it started because she taught her kids and they wanted to take it. And you're saying the same thing, that you taught this group of 5 student athletes, and then they just ran with it. And they're like, we want all of our friends to check in this way.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it's really fun. I mean, in ministry, a lot of times, we teach students things, we train them in certain ways, and we want them to replicate it. But, and usually there's a whole training on, okay, now how do you do this for other people? And so to have to do something and then not have to get to that step where I encourage them to do it with other people, they just do it kind of spontaneously and naturally, was pretty shocking, and made me very curious about like, what is this that we're getting to here? It's obviously meeting a need. And I loved just watching them spontaneously share it with their friends.
That's great. So that was with some student athletes. What was it like introducing it to the staff that you worked with, or was it people you were overseeing? I'm not sure on the language there.
Yeah. So after that experience, I started, when I would lead different trainings, or I remember like a new staff training that I was part of, I think in the fall of 2019. Some of the area team meetings that I was part of, I slowly just started introducing this idea of checking in. I'm trying to remember now exactly when it spilled over to staff. But it just, anytime I led a meeting, basically, if I was in charge, I was like, we're going to start with this checking in thing. And I'd try to kind of pitch it and frame it, invite people into it. And it was really cool because, I mean, the staff who work with students on different campuses, like they caught on right away and they started bringing it to their students as well. And then probably less than a year, I'd show up to meetings that I wasn't leading with people that I hadn't taught it to. And they'd be like, okay, my staff taught me this thing called checking in and we're going to do it at this meeting now. And I was like, I taught that to your staff and now you're teaching that back to a meeting that I'm part of. So like literally that kind of viral
wow,
was just happening. And now, I mean, it's very common for most meetings, at least in my region. That's the job I'm currently, stepping out of, was working in the Mid-Atlantic region, for meetings to have some component of checking in as part of them.
wow. And two questions come out of that. One, how does that make you feel with knowing that all these meetings are taking place and they're all checking in and listening? What does that feel like?
Yeah, it feels, I mean, in a lot of ways, encouraging and affirming, because I believe that it will help us accomplish whatever we're about to do. I remember one meeting that we had a couple months ago, where a group of area directors were talking about some finance stuff, and it was kind of a tense meeting. And the person leading it had us start with checking in with ourselves and then sharing it if we wanted to. And I just felt so grateful. I'm like, yeah, this is going to be a really intense meeting. We need to know how we're showing up and how our emotions we're bringing into this meeting. Like, people probably didn't even know that they were coming in with those. And so I was grateful for the space, and then grateful just to set the tone of this more intense meeting in that way. I think sometimes I can feel discouraged though as well, because for people maybe that I haven't specifically trained in it, and they've kind of gotten the ripple effect of someone taught them about checking in. There's definitely the like, oh, I'm good, I'm fine, kind of that. And if I'm not leading or facilitating, it's hard for me to jump in and be like, wait, that's not an emotion. Like,
that's not a feeling word. Try again.
Yeah. So, and I mean, it's like, it's also when it's not totally the point. Just trying to balance like what's appropriate and how to keep educating and encouraging kind of healthy rhythms around this practice and healthy like skill development, while also knowing that it's not always my place to do that. So trying to do that when I can and just hold it loosely when maybe it's not going as like up to the standards that I want it to, or Luke 10 standards.
That's cool. So you mentioned right before this intense meeting, you said it was a finance meeting. Is that right?
Yeah.
That she had you guys check in with yourselves. How intense makes me think heavy. How were emotions received? How was that like, how was that reciprocated if somebody didn't realize how intense they felt about the finances? What was kind of that culture of safety there in that group?
Yeah, I think enough people have been part of checking, and there's probably even jokes happening in the chat like, oh, Colleen, we're checking in, doing the emotional stuff. But it's all in good natured joking. And I think there were a couple people who were like, I'm fine, no emotions, and I was a little bit like, okay, but there was enough people in the meeting that were vulnerable and like, oh, I'm checking in as nervous or fearful or curious, or, kind of, what I felt like was making space for like, this is a heavier conversation, and I'm not alone in feeling that. We're all to a degree feeling the heaviness of this conversation. So I felt really grateful, and like people entered in and were honest, and we weren't penalized for it. There's not this culture of like, oh, you have to be professional and you can't have heavy emotions. But that acknowledging our heavy emotions helped us have the conversation well.
And has that always been like a reality in your staff meetings or in meetings in general that you've been a part of, that you can show up and be safe? Or is this something that you've introduced in the past 5 years and you're finally like, oh my goodness, I can finally feel safe here, or not be nervous to be scared or something?
Yeah, I've always felt a degree of comfort and safety on the teams that I've been part of. I think when depending on what group of people is gathering, there might be less familiarity, and we're pretty close. We're pretty close community in my staff community, my region. So I think more broadly, maybe with newer people, it sets that safety more quickly. And I feel like it's just been a tool that's been really helpful, that now we're practicing more broadly, and hopefully then making new people also feel safe when they come in, that this is a place where they can really show up as they are.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the beginning, you mentioned you wanted to share some stories. Any story in particular that was popping out for you when you were just kind of like, oh, I need to share them. They are good stories. It can be around staff or students, maybe yourself.
Yeah, let me think for a sec. Yeah, a couple stories come to mind, and it's, I talked to Tony, maybe you, about this. It's really not just checking in that brings transformation. I think it's checking in, it's learning emotional health and resiliency, it's learning to hear God's voice. Like, it's all appreciation and gratitude, unlocking our connection to Jesus. Like, that whole package and culture, when that comes, that's transformative. And so I remember early on, I think, again, this was pre-pandemic, so I was newly learning these rhythms, and I was at a regional leadership meeting, which is kind of the top leadership meeting in my region. I wasn't leading them, I was a member. And I think we were talking about fundraising. So again, like kind of finance, intense, kind of the fundraising needs in our region and our staff. And the conversation was just really heavy. And I was, newly learning that, like, oh, a community can listen to Jesus together. Like it was so heavy that I felt like, how can we not hear God's voice in this? Because I know that Jesus has a different version than kind of what we're feeling right now, but there was so much heaviness, it felt hard to access that. So I wrote a little sticky note to my regional director, and I said, I think we need to listen to Jesus on this. And I kind of like passed it to him in the table, and I felt so nervous. I was like, he knows what he's doing, Colleen. Like, I had all these voices in my head telling me different things, but I felt like, you need to listen to Jesus. And actually, I could help us. Like, I've been trained in how to help groups do this. And so he saw it and kind of wrapped up the conversation. He said, okay, Colleen's going to help us listen to Jesus now around this topic. And so there was 15 people around the table, and we'd never done, the idea of hearing God's voice wasn't new, but we'd never done it as a community before. So I just said, okay, I think we need to hear God's voice on this. And I'm going to give us 2 minutes to be quiet. And if you don't hear anything, you can pass, but then we're just going to go around the room and see if we hear a theme emerge of what Jesus might want to say to us. And so, that felt like a risk, but it also felt like the conversation shifted from kind of spiraling into despair and fear that can happen with money conversations, and allowing Jesus's voice to break through and just remind us of some truths that he's provided. He will provide. Like, he wants us, he wants our good. He wants to help us in our leadership in this issue. That was a fun one, and one that I felt like I was following Jesus in that as well.
Yeah. Just the prompt to even write it on a sticky note, and then just being, all right, Colleen's gonna lead.
Yeah. And I'm grateful that that says a lot about my my regional director, that he just had that kind of trust, and he holds things loosely. Like, he was willing to let me kind of facilitate in that moment, and it felt like we partnered together in that, which was cool.
That's so cool. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. So what does your new role look like? How do you plan on being yourself, living the relational revolution in this kind of new role that you find yourself in? What's that going to look like?
Yeah. Well, my official start date is July 1, so I still have a little bit of space, but okay. I am just trying to think through, and a lot of things, like, I'm already in certain teams and meetings that are currently happening. I'm just not kind of the head honcho at this point. There's someone else who's directing us. So I really want to develop this culture of, like, healthy teams who are resilient and emotionally healthy and aware, who know how to hear God's voice together.
Mhm.
And I want that to trickle down to which I've seen. I mean, I just trust it will happen because that seems to be what happens with these rhythms, that it will trickle down to the staff across the country who are working with athletes and bringing these skills to their athletes as well. So, in every meeting I lead, I want to have some component of connection at the start through check-ins or through gratitude and appreciation stories. And then just make it a practice that regularly throughout the meeting, we will stop and check in with Jesus and hear from him as well. I'm a little nervous about it because my region's caught on board, I think mostly. But I now will have staff around the country. I don't know as many of these staff as well. And so there can be different resistance to the idea of hearing God's voice, or even the idea of like sharing an emotion. So I'm recognizing there'll need to be some training, some kind of scaffolding, setting people up well, but also just kind of gently, I feel like John White quote is coming to me, like gently beating the drum or something.
Relentlessly, gently, beating the drum of culture.
Yes.
No, yes, because culture eats strategy for breakfast.
I actually said that quote in one of my interviews for this role.
Amazing.
Well, so because people were asking what my strategy was, and I was like, we need to listen to Jesus around what our strategy is going to be, but I want a culture of like healthy connection with each other and hearing Jesus's voice regularly. And I said, because culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yes.
And I got the job. No, I don't know.
Great quote. Take it from John White. All your interviews. That's great.
Yeah. So I think there's that component of kind of how I lead meetings, how I facilitate. And then also another thing that I've had the chance to do over the past 4 or 5 years is bring these rhythms into our athlete conferencing space. So we do a 24-hour overnight. And the past 3 years or 4 years, I have trained a team of small group facilitators beforehand, who are usually our InterVarsity staff, athletes, InterVarsity staff, and volunteers. And I have, and then they lead, we have it be a small group driven kind of table church, to use Luke 10 language, driven conference setting where they connect deeply at their tables, they learn these rhythms. And so that's happened primarily in our Mid-Atlantic region. And I would love to see that multiply into how we gather athletes across the country for overnights and get them off campus and things like that. So yeah, still kind of thinking about what that implementation will look like, but we've seen a lot of success in our Mid-Atlantic conference or East Coast conference. And so I'm excited to bring that to athletes across the country.
Yeah. And the director role, I think I'm just now catching up. I'm so sorry. The director role isn't just the Mid-Atlantic, is it? It covers all of the United States.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
I'll be part of there's a national director team of people who do focus ministries. So yeah, I'll oversee the whole country along with, there's a director for our Black campus ministries, our Greek fraternity and sorority, nurses, Christian fellowships. Like we have all these kind of corners of campus. We call them focus ministries. And so I'll now represent the athletes to our national, like I'll represent athletes within the organization and then also lead kind of downward as we multiply athlete work across the country.
That's intense.
Yeah. It's been a Jesus-led decision to get here, and feeling overwhelmed some days, but ultimately excited because I do feel like this is the right time, and the Lord, I just want to bring these things that I've learned. I mean, really being part of Luke 10, I think, and seeing these rhythms get implemented in my own life and my staff and students, it just feels like that's a key part of this leadership role that the Lord has for me next.
Beautiful. Thank you. What time did I say we had for our meeting? Do you remember?
I don't remember. So I blocked off an hour, but we can wrap it up whenever. I know it's been a long day of streaming. So if you feel like we've got what we're supposed to, I am supposed to ask you a question though.
Yeah, maybe. I think I was thinking for 30 to 45 minutes. So we definitely have time, and I don't want to cut off your question, but if it has arisen, you can. I'm going to talk a little bit to anybody watching about donations. And when I do that, you can maybe think of that question. So if you are joining us and watching, this is a fundraiser. And if you become a new strategic partner or you increase your monthly giving, we are giving away the audiobook version of The Relational Revolution. And it is going to be read by none other than John White. So if you want a free audiobook, it's not that expensive. It is available, so you can go buy it. But if you want a free one, increase your monthly giving or just start, and we'll send you proper codes and everything to get you set up. So thank you. I think that's my spiel.
Sounds good. I didn't realize the audio version. I need to look that up. So that's great. So if you increase your giving, do you get the audio version too?
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Jesus around that. So I love this fundraising creativity that you guys are rolling out.
Well, thank you. It looks like we just got a message from Shannon.
Oh, hi, Shannon.
And it just popped up on my computer, but I don't know where it went. Oh, wonderful. Here it is. Someone who did not put their name says, Colleen, I wish you were my boss. Your priority of healthy teams that can hear God's voice together sounds so fun. Oh, it was Shannon.
Oh, okay. It's like, that sounds kind of like Shannon, but thank you, Shannon. And Shannon's on our leadership. Hillary and I are on a leader team together, and Shannon's on our leader team. So I appreciate that encouragement.
And we get to be on live and on Zoom together for our leader team this coming Wednesday, 11 Central, 12 noon. Feel free to tune in and watch a community in practice. This is going to be our last session for today. And tomorrow, I believe we start at 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern. The schedule is going to be on Instagram. We're putting it on the website as well. I need to make some tweets. I accidentally missed a meeting on Wednesday, so just changing that graphic a little bit. But that will all be there, and we're working on getting replays available for the evening times for people to tune in and watch what happened during the day, because this is during the day and you might be working.
I know there was some that I was like, oh, I wanted to watch Ryan's before this, and now that I know Bethany was on as well, so it'd be great to see those. I have thought of my question for you. If
Go for it.
Now's the time for that. Hillary, I'm curious, as you've been behind the scenes with all this week and planning, what aspect are you either most excited for or most hoping that people will catch this week, or people will see that comes through in the live?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the way in which we interact with one another and the way that we care and connect and the curiosity and gentleness that we bring to every meeting is so special. And it's hard to communicate in words, the interactions. And I think that level of interaction, like the different interviews, the different circles, the different meetings that will happen, it's so hard to name it, to find adjectives, because I'm on the communication side, and we'll have labels for these meetings and copy and like punchy lines, but it's so hard to name the trust and the relationship that has been built through checking in together, listening together, practicing together, and just holding tensions together and having hard conversations well with one another is so beautiful and worth it. That I hope people are like, oh, I want that. And if you do want that, Colleen's hosting an intro call tomorrow.
I am. Well, that's what I was just thinking. I was like, yeah, you can describe it, you can read about it in the books, but then you get to experience it when you're on an intro call, a church 101, and then a leader team. So as you're saying that, I was just thinking, if you're out there listening, that would be a great thing to join in. Then you get to experience it. And I think you're right, though, the live, just watching how everyone interacts with each other, just gives a different picture, tells a different story than maybe what people have seen before. And that was true for me. So I will pray with you that that happens this week.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions. Do you have any more questions? I was looking at our chat.
Yeah, I don't think so.
All right. Well, then why don't we do a closing round as we do? We don't learn from just experience, but through reflection of that experience. And our closing round is just kind of a summary of what did you see happen today, or what are you taking away? I'm kind of embarrassed that it took so long for my brain to catch up to what director of student ministries athletes means, because we've been talking about this for like a year.
There's lots of titles and names, and they all mean different things in different organizations. So,
and it clicked that it isn't just the Mid-Atlantic, because for so long you've just been in the Mid-Atlantic, and I've just put you as Intervarsity as a Mid-Atlantic thing, and you run all of that anyway. So now you're just running it more on that side, but it's just all encompassing across the United States, which is huge. And
yeah, and it's just Intervarsity is a huge organization, so it's just our athlete ministry, which is, I think a big important part of what we do. We reach the whole campus, but I will be directing our athlete work specifically.
Yes.
So still lots of people around me and above me and doing more leadership things, but yes, it's a big role. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
I think my takeaway was getting to pause and listen after we checked in, just realizing how helpful that was to kind of settle my mind, and helped me to be Jesus-led, us to be Jesus-led in this meeting. And so I'm good at incorporating check-ins at the start of meetings that I facilitate and lead in my work. But the next step of, hey, can we take a moment and listen right now, feels like maybe a new invitation for me to start implementing more regularly. So I was grateful for that reminder.
Thank you. All right. Well, that is all for today. I will see you Wednesday, and we'll pick up on streaming tomorrow, 9 Central, 10 a.m. Eastern.
Great. Thanks, Hillary.
Thank you. See ya.